Hey, everybody, this is TJR, and February 2022 has said goodbye. And so, with that, we are going to take a look at what were some of the best and weirdest comments for February 2022. We did this for the very first time last month for January, and I'm hoping we can do this every month. We'll see. So, first up is a comment from MexiMex, who regularly comments on this channel. And he writes in response to, lo and behold, last month's video about the comments for January. And he writes, I'm going to have to start leaving really weird off the wall comments now to make the cut next month. LOL. Dude, pedal to the metal. Have at it. Go for it, dude. No, I know you were just kidding around. You're just joking. But always, as always, I appreciate your comments. I appreciate everybody's comments. I read every single comment that comes in. I don't always get a chance to respond, but I do read every single one, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so next, we have a comment here. Actually, we have two comments regarding my video that I did last month where I talked about the first 5 albums from War. A while back, I bought the Record Store Day box set from Rhino Records. I took my time digesting those 5 albums, and last month I decided to leave a review of the box set and my thoughts on all 5 albums. And we have a comment here from Nay, who wrote, I thought I read Gawar at first. Sorry about that, Nay. Hope I didn't disappoint you too much. Next, on the same exact video topic, we have a comment from the Vinyl Music Life, who is another regular commenter. He writes, be sure to check out their 1976 release, Platinum Jazz, which is a double album, the 9th studio album by War, released on Blue Note Records in 1976. The album is an unusual entry into War's discography in several aspects. Its first half is new material, while its second half is a compilation of tracks from previous albums. It is also the only record they made for Blue Note, a jazz label, which was then owned and controlled by their current label at the time, United Artists Records. So it was not a matter of changing labels or going outside of contract. And it is their first album to put an emphasis on instrumental jazz-based music, although some tracks have vocals. This album was apparently Blue Note's first platinum disc-selling album. I have this album and I love it. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that heads up. I was not aware of that. I remember seeing that double album ages ago. I always figured that it was just a compilation of previous tracks. Never knew that it had one side of instrumental music. So I definitely want to check that out. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Speaking of videos that didn't get a whole lot of attention, in last month's comments video, I mentioned what is still one of my favorite videos I've ever done on this channel, which was a video called That Time Batman Fought the Beatles. And it's about Batman solving the Paul is dead conspiracy theory mystery. And Derek Roberts, who's a regular commenter, mentioned in response to that, Batman and the Beatles? Ooh, I got one, Mr. R. Paul McCartney was watching the 60s Batman series when writing Hey Jude, but he had a little trouble with the ending. But by that time, the Batman TV show theme was playing in his brain. Na 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 na. Okay, I get it. Last month, I released a video, an analysis discussion that dealt with the influence of children's music on the music of the Beatles. I thought this was a really good video. I was very proud of it. I was disappointed that it didn't draw more attention, but the people who did watch it responded to it very positively. And one comment that I thought was quite interesting was from Michael Barkas. He writes, my 23-year-old son overheard me listening to your Beatles video the other day and said, he makes a good point. I can hear the children's music influence in the Beatles songs. That explains why Michael Jackson bought them. Then he writes, I didn't know whether to laugh or be disturbed. Michael, I feel the same way. Thanks for posting that comment, though. Also, last month, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame released its class of 2022 nominees. Robert and I discussed them in a video. We got some comments regarding that, one in particular by Charles Switzer, who wrote, "The Kate Bush disconnect is truly laughable, but not surprising with all of these American reactions/analysis. But what does her being British have to do with it? If you took all British inductees out of the hall, half the building would be empty. She is way more talented than Beck, both sonically and lyrically, which made me shake my head in laughter when you were singing his praises, and Devo, since the same has been applied to Kate for over 40 years. She is also more influential than even Pat Benatar, who covered one of her songs coincidentally, but carry on." Charles, I'm not sure if you watched the whole video or if you just didn't quite understand what we were trying to say. Myself personally, I first became aware of her seeing her on TV, on SNL back in the 70s. After seeing that, I went out and bought her album, The Kick Inside, which was the current album in release at that time. I own a couple of her albums, including 50 Words for Snow, which I got on vinyl and which I featured on the Music Worth Buying series that Robert and I used to do. My partner has all her albums, so I'm very familiar with her catalog. Robert has been very familiar with who she is and what her artistic contributions are, even though he doesn't count himself as a fan per se. I think that when Robert and I were talking about her being British, we certainly weren't saying that she shouldn't be included because she's British. I think we were saying that most American audiences just aren't familiar with her. She hasn't made the impact in the US that she has made in the UK. And I think that has a lot to do with why the governing body of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame probably hasn't quite responded to her as strongly as they should. I think both Robert and I have no problem with her being, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I think that Robert, even though he's not familiar with her catalog, I'm familiar with her catalog. So I think she should be inducted. And I think that Robert, just knowing her reputation, certainly has no problem with it either. So I don't know, maybe you misunderstood what we were saying. Maybe we didn't communicate it well enough. But we still really like Beck and Devo too, and want to see them in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We want to see all three of them. I noticed that there are definitely some hardcore Kate Bush fans out there. There was one who started spamming everybody that commented on, whether they commented on Kate Bush or not. They just kept spamming Kate Bush, Kate Bush, Kate Bush. There's no call for that. I mean, if you want to go ahead and state that you like Kate Bush, that's fine. But when you start spamming everybody, that's just not good. That's just not cool. Anyways, though, I had to basically kick that person out for spamming. It wasn't Charles Switzer, it was someone else. But at any rate, though, there was another comment here that we got here on the same topic. And this one here is from Indra111. He writes, "The US doesn't deserve Kate Bush. All I can say is, we'll take her anyways." Next is a comment from Holden Caulfield, whom I remember from Catching the Rye. It's good to hear from him again. He writes in response to a video that I released quite a number of years ago, a video that still, however, gets views and still gets comments, which I'm very appreciative of. And the video is entitled "My Beef with Four Chords" by the Axis of Awesome. And Four Chords by the Axis of Awesome is a very funny and entertaining video. I mentioned this a couple of times in my video, and once I read to you the comment, you'll understand why I'm bringing this up. And he writes, "No reasonable person gets butthurt at Axis for that song." I think what he means is video, not song. "Unless it's a YT Views pissing contest, obsessed, miserable muso who missed the point." I guess he means B. "There no single person who saw that show." He means there is no single person who saw that show, is what he's talking about. That didn't hear a song that they love in the various iterations of that montage/melody. Way to miss the point and bore people. Now, the point of the video was that in their comedy routine, of course, they have to simplify all the songs that they're referencing to make it fit the comedy sketch, or the comedy's not going to work. And I think I brought that up in my video too. But I felt that the other side of the story needed to be told, that there were probably a lot of people who didn't understand that there were way more intricacies nuances to those songs, and also just different chords being used than was being brought up in this video of theirs, the 4 chords by the Axis of Awesome. And of course, I understand why, because it's a comedy video. But I felt the other side of the story needed to be told, so I told it. And as it turns out, a lot of people did comment and say to me, I didn't understand that. So Holden Caulfield saying, that nobody didn't understand that is arrogant, because he's assuming that everybody's thinking along the same lines he is. And that's just not true. Then he writes, something to mull over. Noun, comedy. 1, professional entertainment consisting of jokes and sketches intended to make an audience laugh. A cabaret with music, dancing, and comedy. Similar, light entertainment. 2, a play characterized by its humorous or satirical tone and its depictions of amusing people or incidents in which the characters ultimately triumph over adversity. Shakespeare's comedies. And this guy says I bore people. I did leave a response to this. You can go ahead and read it if you want. Honestly, I think there's only one person who got butthurt over this. Next, we have a comment from Kenneth Kellett. And this is in response to a video I did where I reviewed a graphic novel entitled The Beatles, Paul is Dead. This was a really great graphic novel. It was beautifully drawn and it was really well written. I initially thought this book was going to be an alternate history story where Paul really did die in the 60s. And there was this massive cover up that went on for decades and decades. And I thought this might be a cool alternate timeline story. It wasn't. It was something completely different. I didn't give it away in my review, and I'm not going to give it away now because I think the book is worth reading. I don't want to spoil it for anybody. But he wrote, "You now have zero credibility. Paul is dead, and had you done any research at all, you would have found the truth. Viewers who know the truth can avoid this propaganda and give zero credence to the inaccurate speculations of just another grifter who supports the imposter fall, or Billy Shears, or William Campbell." Yeah, the Paul is Dead people, they're pretty hardcore with anybody who disagrees with them. I actually did once spend a day reading a ton of the Paul is Dead website evidence, what have you. And when you start taking it all in without any kind of contradictory opinions, it can kind of start sucking you down the rabbit hole. But the moment you start to really think about it, it does kind of fall apart. At any rate, though, Kenneth, you really put me in my place. Thank you. So now here's the last comment. We started with a comment from MexiMex. We're going to end with a comment from MexiMex. And he is responding to a video I released last month where I just kind of discussed reactions to the first initial teaser for the upcoming Amazon series, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, which is going to be a series that will chronicle the second age of Middle-earth. It is not set in the continuity as Peter Jackson's films. It is a completely separate series. I wanted to point that out because in my initial video, I think I may have been under the impression that it was an actual prequel to the movie series. It's not. So if I did in any way indicate that, I correct myself now. Anyways, though, this trailer did generate a lot of negative buzz for a lot of reasons that I don't think are, well, I think it's just outrage mongering because a lot of people were just upset that there was a black dwarf. At any rate, I'm not going to get into that whole thing. But basically, the thrust of my video was that anytime something like this is adapted, some popular franchise from one medium to another, at the end of the day, whether or not it's any good doesn't matter because the original is still there and it's always going to be there and it will always be there to be discovered and be enjoyed. So MexiMex left what I thought was a really good, thoughtful argument. And he writes, remakes / adaptations can ruin the original films / books, though. If somebody's first experience of a story is through a poorly told version, they are robbed of experiencing the original work without knowing what will happen. That aside, though, if they are going to change things as much as they seem to be doing here, why not just create a new thing rather than try to alter something else into what they want? Now, before I discuss the entire argument in whole, just that last sentence, Right now, all we really know that they're changing is they're compressing a lot of the timeline for the Second Age of Middle-earth. Beyond that, we don't know too much else. We'll see what happens. I mean, Peter Jackson changed things with his films, and I don't think he left anybody a bad impression of Tolkien's work. I know there might have been some hardcore Tolkien fans who had issues with some of his changes, but overall, I think that Jackson's films made people want to read the books and definitely did not leave a bad taste in anybody's mouth about it. I'll go ahead and read the rest of his comment, though. I'll give the series a fair crack of the whip when it drops. I agree with you 100%. And I generally hope for the best. I agree with you 100%. I am rather worried it'll fall short of what it should or could be, though. And Mexi Mex, you're absolutely right. It could. It very well could. It could also exceed our expectations. We don't know yet. It's too early to tell. But let's get back to that first sentence about remakes, adaptations ruining the original source material, the original film, the original book, all of that. So I'm going to kind of draw from my own experience. I won't say you're wrong that such things could potentially ruin the source material for some people, not necessarily everybody. But I'll tell you something. For a good portion of my life, I thought that the 60s Batman TV show that starred Adam West ruined Batman. Now, some history. I started reading Batman in the 70s. Little did I realize, however, that the opposite was true. The Batman TV series of the 60s actually saved Batman because during the late 60s, sales on that title were so low that DC Comics was seriously considering canceling the series, hard as that is to believe. The Batman TV series saved Batman from cancellation, kept the book going. And once it ended, very soon after that, the editorial direction that took over the book began to strip away everything about the campy 60s TV series and also everything that was campy and goofy about the books themselves and had been goofy about those books, which is largely what the series is based on throughout the entire 50s and early 60s leading up to the TV show. It was a very silly book at that point. And so, you know, that series was actually being very true to the books. But after that series ended, the direction was to bring the series back to its roots of the 1930s, where you had this more serious, grittier, dark, avenging crusader. And this is the Batman that I started reading in the 70s, when you had artists like Neil Adams and Dick Giordano and writers like Denny O'Neil taking over the book. And this trend would continue leading up to Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns in the 80s. However, throughout that whole time, up until the 89 Batman movie from Tim Burton, if I mentioned Batman to anybody, all people said was, oh, Batman, yeah, na 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 na, biff, bam, pow. And everybody's impression of it was the 60s series. So I thought, oh gosh, this series has ruined Batman. No one understands what he's really about, you know? And the thing I didn't realize is that people loved the Batman series of the 60s. Even if I didn't, people loved it. They were fond of it. They had fond memories of it. And because of that, audiences were jazzed for the Tim Burton 89 movie, even though it was going to have a completely different tone. It was going to have a darker tone like the comics that I was reading. People were jazzed for it. Now, I'll make another comparison here real quick and tie them together. Back in the 70s, there was a Lord of the Rings movie. It wasn't very good. But unlike the Batman 60s TV show, it wasn't popular. That movie just came and went. It was a blip. People forgot about it. So even though it wasn't a good adaptation, it made no impact because people didn't like it. People liked the Batman TV show. It made a definite impact on the culture, but it never ruined it. The Batman comics that I enjoyed were still there. Now, of course, now with the release of the Batman and of course the Christopher Nolan films, we have the darker Batman in the public consciousness now. But as the years have gone by, of course, I've learned to love the 60s Adam West series. In fact, I own it on Blu-ray. That's how much my opinion has changed about that. So this new Lord of the Rings show, if it's popular, well, if it's bad, let's say that, if it's bad, I can't see it really ruining the Lord of the Rings because of the impact, the cultural impact that Peter Jackson's films have made. I think that is much stronger than this series potentially being bad. And if it is bad, I think it's just going to come and go. What people are going to remember is Peter Jackson's films first, if they've never read the books, and then, of course, the books for those who've read them. So I don't see this series, if it's really awful, having any impact. If it's awful, people are just going to turn it off. Here in the internet age, even if Tolkien is completely mischaracterized in this series, and maybe there are people who've never watched the Peter Jackson films, so they don't have that version to fall back on, there's still the internet to tell everybody, hey, wait a minute, there's more to this than you realize. So I just don't see that as being very possible, especially now in the current internet age. But at the end of the day, Meximex, I'm going to say you're not wrong, because a skewered adaptation can change how someone perceives something. It could potentially still ruin it for them. But I think the information age really combats that. Also, at the end of the day, you can't change how people think. However, with all this said, at the end of the day, you can't change how people think. All you can change is how you choose to react to them. Anyways, those are what I thought were the most unique, interesting, and off-the-wall comments for February 2022. As always, if you like what I do here, be sure to click like, click subscribe, and smash the bell notification icon. And please leave a comment, of course. And also, I want to thank my patron supporters who are helping me make more videos. If you'd like to be a patron supporter, please go to patreon.com/TJR the original. Pledge whatever you can. If you can't pledge anything, I understand. Just click like, and that'll help a lot. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. We'll look forward to checking out the comments for March next time in April. Bye-bye.